This film is about some of the maritime activities carried out during the Second World War, mostly for the Navy, by the consulting engineering firm now known as Posford Duvivier. They were innovative in conception and design, and were executed under the direction of the late Guy Maunsell and his partner John Posford, who now takes up the story.
In 1941, the enemy was nightly subjecting London to a blitz, and its bombers were able to fly up the Thames Estuary, most of the way out of the effective range of shore-based batteries and anti-aircraft detection equipment, laying magnetic and acoustic mines in the sea lanes, and causing tremendous casualties to life and property in Dockland and the City of London. General Sir Frederick Pyle, GOC Anti-Aircraft Command, wished he had island-heavy batteries in the outer Thames Estuary between Harwich and Margate, and others further upstream, to supplement lightly armed and fairly ineffective Thames paddle steamers. This would involve secretly placing on the seabed, many miles from our coast and only 10 minutes flying time from the enemy-held shore, fully armed, equipped and manned structures with all necessary ammunition, accommodation and food for up to maybe 3 weeks in the event of enemy action and or weather preventing more frequent revictualling. It would have to be a combined operation with the Navy. Admiral Sir Bruce Fraser, then Controller of the Navy, mentioned this to Sir Leopold Saville, one-time Admiralty Civil Engineer-in-Chief, and in 1941 a partner in the consulting engineering firm Sir Alexander Gibb and Partners. Gibbs put this urgent problem to a brilliant though unorthodox design engineer in their organization, Guy Maunsell. He devised the Thames Estuary Special Defences to be manned by the Royal Marines and known as the Naval Forts. Later, I, who was also employed by Gibbs, joined Maunsell on the project, as did George Smith, who did the detail reinforced concrete design, David Weller, and others. These naval forts, of which there were 4, were designed to be built mostly reinforced concrete at a site up the River Thames at which they would be completely equipped and then commissioned with their full complement of 100 officers and men, and then towed by ocean-going tugs as far as possible by night to their destined site, where they would at daybreak in the space of a few minutes be crash-dived onto the seabed, instantly ready for action. Their armament would consist of 2 heavy 3.7-inch guns and 2 Bofors guns, together with radio location, predictors and gun-laying equipment, and accommodation and living facilities for the 100 mortals aboard. There was considerable scepticism at the Admiralty as to whether this proposal would be feasible, as it was feared that the structure would break up when it was unceremoniously dumped onto an unprepared sea bed, an operation never before attempted. It was not until mid-1941 that the order to proceed was given. A small dry dock was prepared at the Thameside site at Gravesend, together with 2 berths on the tidal foreshore there, so as to enable forts to be moved from one berth to another, and so speed construction. Prefabrication was extensively used. The base, 170 feet by 90 feet and 14 feet high, was built in 6 weeks, and then floated to its second berth while another fort was started in the dry dock. The twin towers, 60 feet high, complete with 7 decks, were built in 2 weeks, and the steel superstructure was then erected, and the tower moved to its third berth for fitting out and commissioning. It then weighed 4,000 tons. The first fort, Ruff's Fort, was towed from Gravesend to its site 8 miles east of Harwich on the 11th of February 1942. The walls of the concrete hull were temporarily heightened by 4-foot timber bulwarks as a safeguard against too much wave smash and premature sinking of the fort. They had to be dismantled when the site was reached. Only one side was dismantled when the naval officer in command ordered immediate sinking as enemy planes were approaching. This allowed the water to enter the hull unevenly, and the fort rolled over sideways alarmingly until the forequarter hit the seabed, and it then righted itself. When this film was shown at the Admiralty, in spite of the explanation for the inelegant sinking, their lordships showed some disquiet. They thought it would be better if the engineer who was in charge of the construction of Gravesend and was fully conversant with the project took charge, and so as put in command of the operation in future. Sunk Head Fort, 15 miles southeast of Harwich, and Tongue Sand Fort, 7 miles north of Margate, were placed on the 1st of June and the 27th of June 1942, respectively. The fourth naval fort, Knockjohn, was placed on the 1st of August 1942. This fort was sunk in 43 feet of water and went down, as had the other two, as planned. These forts played a decisive role in the acceptance of the Marlborough Harbour scheme, a proposal originally considered impracticable. On this occasion, a destroyer, HMS Campbelltown, arrived at the site just before grounding, bearing the CIGS, General Sir Alan Brooke, the Commander-in-Chief Combined Operations, Admiral Mountbatten, and other top brass to observe the operation. The CIGS then left for the Cairo Conference on the 4th of August 1942, having himself witnessed the feasibility of making the breakwater for the Marlborough Harbour out of concrete floating units, and then crash diving them without damage onto an unprepared seabed. The design of the Marlborough breakwater units was commissioned after the first two naval forts had been grounded, and the drawings were completed after the fourth naval fort had been positioned. This is one of the Marlborough breakwater units under tow, much the same dimensions as the naval forts. Anti-Aircraft Command next wanted 3 forts sited upstream of the naval forts, each comprising 4 3.7-inch heavy guns, 2 Bofors guns, a searchlight, and the latest radio location equipment. To meet this need, the Army force was designed, each composed of 7 separate towers linked by light bridges. Extensive prefabrication was used so as to complete the 21 towers as quickly as possible and keep to the tight completion schedule of 2 towers every 2 weeks, as they could only be floated off their building berths over high spring tide, which occur fortnightly. Of course, the weather also had to be suitable, not more than force 4 wind. Built at the same site of Gravesend, the bases in the shape of an Oxford picture frame were constructed 2 at a time in the dry dock, the hollow members being 85 feet long, 6 feet high, and 5 feet wide. This took a fortnight, and they were then floated to 2 of 8 prepared berths on the foreshore. The 3-foot diameter, 65 feet high legs were then built up, surmounted by the 20-foot high 2-story octagonal steel house, 36 feet between parallel walls. On the top was mounted either a gun, a searchlight, or radar equipment. Including the fitting out, this work took 8 weeks, so that 2 towers, each 750 tons in total weight, could leave the berths each fortnight, and 2 more bases leave the dry dock to take their place. They were taken to sea, slung from 2 pontoons equipped with lowering tackle, to place them on the seabed in correct distance apart, so that the prefabricated bridges would fit. The naval and the army force together fulfilled at one time or another every use for which they were built. A third wartime original was the reinforced concrete floating dock. This resulted from a conversation with Admiral Sir John Tovey, Commander-in-Chief Nor Command at Chatham in June 1943. He told me there was a need for raising out of the water tank landing craft in order to repair damage sustained by them during exercises preparatory to the Normandy invasion. He said the Admiralty could not provide slipways in time when there was no steel plate available to build floating docks. A drawing of a reinforced concrete floating dock was produced in 10 days, which Tovey sent to the controller of the Navy, at that time Admiral Wakewater, who forwarded it to the Civil Engineer-in-Chief and the Director of Naval Construction. Those departments were sceptical about the feasibility of the proposal, but they were overruled, and in the first instance 3 floating docks to lift 400-ton craft were ordered to be built. The first one was built in 3 months, and thereafter they were floated out of the one building basin at the rate of 2 every 4 weeks. There were eventually 4 types to lift 250 tons, 400 tons, 800 tons, and 1,000 tons. The dock walls were 4 inches or 5 inches thick. The sections of the walls were prefabricated flat in stacks, one on top of another at 24-hour intervals. The wall and rib sections of a whole floating dock could be erected like a house of cards in 2 days, with the projecting reinforcing bars intermeshing, and the joists between them zipped up with in-situ concrete. 52 docks were eventually ordered to be built, in 2 yards in this country and 2 yards in India, and 1 in Australia. They were towed to Belgium, Normandy, the Mediterranean, and 1 even from here to Singapore. Although conceived as an emergency wartime measure, some have been in use for 50 years. The army forts were removed at the end of the war, but the naval forts are still there, though the guns have been removed. None of these projects would probably have been done in peacetime in the face of codes of practice, rules and regulations. However, the necessity for wartime solutions allows the release of shackles on design and provide the excitement of innovative engineering.